Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about why your second builds always suck. Now, this video is not meant to be condescending in any way, shape, or form. I'm actually one of the people that makes mistakes whenever they reroll into new builds as well. I reroll into them too early. I underestimate how much they cost. There's a lot of issues that you can have, and that it does not just affect new players at all. So if that happens to you regularly, it's not just second builds, but in general, you're in good company. So maybe this video is more of a therapy session that you guys can listen into. But why do we do it? We all know this experience. We have our first build, our league starter. Everything runs well. Sometimes you don't like the build, you reroll into a different one. But overall, you complete the Atlas, you're happy with the build, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then you're like, oh, I'm just going to farm up a little bit more and reroll into a certain build. And once you reroll, whether you follow a guide or you did it yourself, you're like, oh my God, this is actually worse than my league starter. But I already sold all my gear because I needed it to buy stuff for the new build. What do I do now? Actually, people who literally quit the league after that. But what is the problem here? Actually, the first one is league starters are actually incredibly hard to beat early. If you are running a optimized league starter, it is very hard to spec out of it because it is literally made for what you're doing right now. You're completing the Atlas. You're doing early farming strats like Expedition or Essence. You're playing a skill that is made to not need any gear, and all of a sudden you're trying to reroll with like 100 divines, 150 divines. The jump from a league starter that's like 20, 30 divines to an endgame build that's like 150 or 100 divines is actually pretty slim. Depending on the build, you might actually get weaker. That is because content creators and people in general, not only content creators, people in general put way more effort into their league starters because that is where it matters the most. And that is where, for example, I want to present it in a way where a new player can pick it up. So it's like kind of foolproof. And with that comes a lot of optimization. Whereas in endgame, optimization is mostly found in items and new interactions. The league mechanic always changes stuff for endgame builds way more than for league starters as well. So just make sure you understand that. The second thing is you get FOMO seeing other people juice. I had that this league. I saw how crazy the league mechanic is. I wanted to take it slow, kind of like explore, right? I'm on my league starter, which doesn't have really... I mean, it was very strong, but it wasn't enough damage to like destroy all of these Exodia mobs. You try to farm Abysses, but you get absolutely one shot on your like 30 divine character or something. Meanwhile, other people already have a headhunter, right? That's all fine and dandy. This really depends on how much you play. Do not get the FOMO. Understand that whatever they're farming, it's still going to be there whenever you're ready. The league is very long. A lot of people who go super hard first week quit after like 2 weeks anyways. There's not much more to say here. FOMO is always a bitch, but it is something that you have to regulate. Otherwise, you're going to make very bad build decisions. Number 3 is you don't account for mapping investment. If you want to juice maps right now and you want to get tabs full of currency and loot, chances are you need sextons, you need scarabs, you need maps, you need to reroll those maps, maybe even exalt the maps, right? There's a lot of mapping supplies involved. And if you go to 0 currency after making your build, you're going to be like, oh, so now I have to alch and go, so I can't do what I want to do anyways. Make sure that depending on what you want to farm next, you actually lay aside those divines, whether it be 5, 10, 20 more, depending on what you want to run, before you spend everything on your build. Equally important. I see this all the time. You don't account for your gems, links, and colors. Maybe you have something that's hard to color, right? Maybe like a Covenant with 4 or 5 off colors. You need to get your 6 link. You completely forget about it. Your setup needs an Awakened Chain or Awakened Fork or anything like that, and you just cannot afford it. And you really want to have your Awakened Gems early, because if you don't get them, half them from the get-go, you have to level them up later, which is going to take even longer, so your power delay is even bigger. And yeah, colors are a very hidden one there in general as well, with hard to color items where you actually have to use tainted currency. Now then we have one that I am guilty of. Every single league I over invest into certain items. I love fancy items, whether it comes to Watcher's Eyes, certain jewels. Now we have that which was taken. Whenever I see a that which was taken this league that's fancy, I almost immediately want to buy it because I'm like, this might never turn up again. I might as well buy it. Maybe I'm going to use it down the line. And I end up spending 40, 50 divines on a jewel with a total budget of like 200 divines, which is just crazy and stupid. Or imagine searching for a 2-stat Watcher's Eye, and then you see that perfect 3-stat, but it costs you 40 divines, whereas the normal one is like 10, and you're like, that's gonna go up in value really hard, right? And you're like, oh my God, I can't buy it, I shouldn't buy it, but you mostly do. Now, while these fancy items can be a great investment in the long term, in the short term, you could have used those divines probably better, so just watch out for that whenever you buy those high-ticket items. Make sure that they are actually worth it and upgrade your build to a big extent, and it's not just you pay 30 extra divines to get another 15 attack speed while you have precision. Number 6 is not to be understated this league. Some leagues are harder than others. In some leagues, it's a complete pushover. Depending on what you farm, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even affect the maps you run. It doesn't affect your juice. This league is, I mean, it's crazy. It is absolutely insane. A mapper that wants to comfortably do the league mechanic has to have between 50 and 100 million damage. That isn't too conditional as well, unless you want to stand there at for 10 seconds against rares that have 10k juice. And this is something that's hard to expect early, but you have to kind of take the temperature, look on Reddit, look other streamers up, look at how they're doing. Do they need a headhunter to do the league mechanic? Do they need a Defiance of Destiny? Is it very rippy, right? Make your second build choice depend on that, and make it depend on how much you need to farm up before you transition into that build. And then last, but definitely not least, is you play off meta a lot as your second build. And that is totally understandable. I'm the first person who gets it. You see something on Reddit and you're like, this looks broken, I should try that as well. You don't really look into how much they spent, that they are doing very targeted content, and you maybe overestimate that build or that skill, or you get too high on your own ideas and you think something is viable for 50, 60 divines, but in reality it needs 200 or more before it starts scaling. Getting high on your own supply, kind of loving your babies too much, quote unquote, is definitely a problem where you just make the POB look like it's gonna be good. You inflate it with certain, I don't know, buttons. You have 7 buttons to press. All of your damage is conditional. Maybe you give a new skill too much credit. You didn't research it enough. You didn't test with poison how many overlaps you actually get. All of that good stuff will lead you to make bad decisions, because obviously there are endgame builds that are very established and well made. But if you wanna divert from that, then you have to either be 100% certain that it's gonna work, or you should probably lay aside way more currency than you think you actually need to adjust for certain problems. And that also brings me to my last point. Adjusting to problems is a big deal with builds that you haven't played before. I'll give you an example right here. I had this planned out and I didn't get a certain item that I really wanted. So then I would have to get this split personality with plus strength, plus intelligence. What I didn't know is that this goddamn Captain Lance fella is just chunking out videos with his energy blade build, and the split personality costs 35 divines, so I didn't even think about it. I didn't need it beforehand. And what I needed to do for several levels is go 1, 2, 3, get this int node, and then get this int node, which completely f***ed up the build in a lot of different ways. So what I'm trying to say here is, you're not going to get it perfect on your POB. You're going to have to adjust certain items, whether it be what I just said, or I don't know, you find out that you actually need all res on here instead of all attributes. So now you have to buy a new cluster, which could cost you 20 divines. And sure, you could sell this cluster, but now you have to wait until that cluster sells so you can buy the new cluster and whatnot. It is a complete show, and you never want to get into this situation, because the more you have to stall, the more you can't play the game, which is less fun, and you can't earn any currency. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. This, for once, didn't get triggered by anybody but myself, because I make a lot of these mistakes all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So maybe this could kind of be a nice therapy session for everybody. Maybe we can do better in the future. And with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.